Welcome to HCD Neighborhood Connect Podcast. I'm Joyce Cox, the manager of the Office of Communications and Civic Engagement.
And I'm Paul Young, the Director of Housing and Community Development for the City of Memphis.
Well, Paul, there are some fantastic things happening in the community today.
Exactly.
And today we have Miss Ashley Cash. She's the administrator from the Office of Comprehensive Planning.
Yes,
that's
thank
correct.
You. Mm-hmm.
And Dr. Brenda Taylor, who is the executive director of the Glenview CDC. Welcome, ladies.
Thank you all for being here. So this is an exciting time in the city of Memphis. Many people out have heard about Memphis 3.0. Hopefully they have gotten some information on what that means, but if they didn't, they're listening to the right podcast because we have you guys here to talk to us about it today. So Ashley, I'm going to start with you and just ask you, what is Memphis 3.0 and why are we doing it?
Great. Thanks, Paul. So Memphis 3.0 is the city's first comprehensive plan in almost 40 years. It's a major initiative of Mayor Strickland, and what we really hope to do is to engage the community, engage citizens around a variety of issues that can help build or help set us on a good foundation for our coming future.
Great. So I know that over the past 2 weeks, we have had a lot of community engagement. I think there were over 14 meetings that took place in districts throughout the city. Yeah. What type of feedback and responses are you getting from the community?
Yeah, we had a really great turnout, especially during sort of the holiday season and when it was starting to get cold. And so people were, first of all, very excited that they were involved and very excited about the city taking on this process to engage citizens. Some of the things that we heard when we asked people things like, what do they love about the city? They said the people, they said the assets that you sort of think of when you think of Memphis now, which is the grit and grind feeling that everybody has, the Green Line, Shelby Farms and their local parks, and also places like the zoo. And then a couple of ideas that people had or areas that need improvement were people are still dealing with blight in their cities, in their neighborhoods. People are concerned about the placement of investment and where certain investment is occurring. De-annexation, of course, came up in a couple of our public meetings. And people were looking for something new with transit to help them get around a little bit better. And just about all of those issues will we hope to have a part in Memphis 3.0 for the plan.
Well, I'm excited about it. I had an opportunity to facilitate at a few of them.
You sure did.
And some of the things that I didn't realize that a lot of people don't really know what's going on in the city. Even the work that we do at HCD, people were just, well, I didn't know you guys did that. And I think this is just a good opportunity to get the word out, to connect us as a city. And then once you get to know people, then you'll know how to deal with them. You know how to help them.
Right.
So I was really, really pleased with a lot of the turnout and the information I learned personally. So.
Yeah, one of the things, I just happen to be a planner, so I get excited about this kind of talk and conversation. But one of the things I see as being the most valuable part of any planning process is just the engagement, the opportunity to get people out of their homes, connecting with their neighbors, to hear and see some of the things that are happening in their communities, because a lot of times it's just a matter of making the different things that we are doing in this community known, because as Joyce mentioned, a lot of people just don't know. The other thing, and Ashley, I want to give you this question because I've had to answer it numerous times, but what's in the end, what does it all mean?
So in the end, we hope for a couple of different outcomes. One that is major, I think, is a more engaged community with enhanced civic capacity. But as it relates to the plan in our city, we're hoping that the engagement that occurs and the decision-making that occurs over the next 2 years through this Memphis 3.0 process is really streamlined growth strategy that we can all agree on. Understanding where we should invest our dollars and how we can do that in a more strategic way across the city. And then people are also concerned about, where development is occurring. And so we hope through this process we can direct the correct type of investment in different neighborhoods throughout the city as well.
That's great. And I want to bring Dr. Taylor in on that question because you are the executive director of the Glenview CDC, one of my favorite neighborhoods, beautiful historic district. What does this plan mean for you? How does it address any of the needs that you're seeing daily in your community?
I think as far as Glenview is concerned, we're so very excited about the comprehensive plan. And that has caused us to start working amongst ourselves to get together and to come up with a plan for the Glenview community. For us, it means, and let me go back and say that the engagement of the residents in the communities has been wonderful, and I think it's a wonderful strategy to get feedback from individuals in the various communities so that you really know what's needed in those communities. I think, and as I was looking at something the other day, going back to John McKnight, who has this idea about the assets model versus the charity model, I think it's helping us to think about what are the important assets in our community, and we've had that discussion. We're looking at the people. We're looking at the skills of the people and the physical environment. So it means that we're wanting to improve Glenview, that Glenview really, let me go back and say that it was on the National Historic Register in 1999. And since that time, we have seen we had major challenges in the community because some of the individuals have died. They're no longer with us. And other individuals have come in and purchased the properties, and some of the properties are rental properties, and they have truly gone down quite a bit. So we're wanting to maintain the historic feature of that community. We want to preserve the historical features of the community, and this plan will help us tremendously in doing that.
I think it's more like all hands on deck. Everybody's connected. Everybody is doing their part, and they know we're all marching to the same drum beat. I think that's awesome.
This is the Neighborhood Connect podcast, and we are here with Dr. Brenda Taylor and Ashley Cash. So, Ashley, I want to go back into the planning process and some of the things that you've seen in the community. What are some of the next steps? So we know that over this past 2-week period, there's been a number of rallies, and this is kickoff. The energy is high. How do we capture that momentum, and what are we going to do after this to continue this?
So first, you're absolutely right. We were very excited. We had nearly 1,000 people at those rallies across the city within 2 weeks, which is great. But one of the concerns that we heard at a couple of the rallies that we are aware of is there are many more of my neighbors here that aren't, you're not talking to right now. And so our next steps are simply sort of taking the information that was passed along or shared at the rallies and sort of disseminating it, synthesizing it to determine, some very early baseline. These are the things that we should be looking at. These are the things that are on people's minds the most. And then we're going to take it a step further and try to reach out to those neighborhoods that we didn't directly reach out to, like Dr. Taylor and her group, that we can say, okay, now we've got some time to figure out what works with your schedule. How can we sit and talk about some of your city priorities or some things that need to happen in your neighborhood? And so we're still in that inventory and analysis phase of the planning process, and we'll stay here for a couple of months. We've been trying to tell people and express to people this is a long journey. It's a 2-year process, and we've got to see what people are saying first. We've got to see where everybody is before we can get into decision making and priority setting. But that's what comes next on this process.
So I also heard some people saying, well, we have neighborhood plans, and some of them are just sitting on the shelf. So how do you address that?
Right. Very good point, Joyce. I'm glad you brought that up. So we're in that inventory and analysis phase, and then the next step is priority setting, and then after that we get into district planning, and that's where we go deeper into the community level. So right now we're looking at the city's vision and what do you want for the city. Late spring we kind of get into more of that district level planning. What do you want for your neighborhood? And those areas that already have those existing plans, we're doing this now. We're going out and we're trying to talk with the people who sort of put those plans together, or the people who still hold those plans, to see where are you on that plan. What are some next steps? What's been accomplished? What do you really want to see? how can we engage the community around this existing plan to make sure, that these ideas were created with a larger community and not just a small section of people. And then how can we connect you with, maybe not directly with the resources from our offices, but how can we connect you with the person or the group or agency that might be interested in that project? And so we're slowly doing that. Although we're going along our time frame, we don't have to wait 2 years to reach out to some of these communities and say, we know you've got a plan, and help them with the next steps on that process.
Well, I say this, you certainly have hit the ground running.
Yes.
Literally.
Absolutely.
So, Dr. Taylor, I want to fold you back in this question that I asked you, Ashley. I'm probably going to ask you this one as well. But if this plan is successful and we get to achieve all of the things that we set forth, what does Glenview look like in the future?
Well, let me say that Glenview is one of those communities that has a plan that's been sitting on the shelf for a long time. We've begun taking the plan off the shelf and getting some of that dust off of it. Basically, too, we have begun to develop a relationship between the neighborhood association and the CDC. I think that's very, very important, that you build a strong relationship between those two groups, and that's what we have done. It means for Glenview that we will have a community that's beautiful, that's revitalized. We will have homes that have been preserved, or that ones that we can have maintained, that have been preserved, that our blight that we have in that community will be decreased in the future, and that you have individuals in the community who are working together. And I think that's going to be very, very important. And as I said before, looking at that asset model, and that's what we want to look at. How do you get the people connected, and how do you get the individuals in the neighborhoods feeling a part of what is about to happen? So that's what we're doing as well. We want cultural diversity in our neighborhoods, and so we're looking at having various cultures coming in and living in our neighborhoods as well. We don't want to be limited. We want to have our Glenview Park. We have a park there in Glenview, and that's one of our biggest assets. We want to look at more programs. We want to look at at an increase in the usage of the park and in the community center. So,
well, this is the Neighborhood Connect podcast, and we're here with Dr. Brenda Taylor and Mrs. Ashley Cash.
Hi, I'm Ashley Cash, Administrator of Memphis 3.0, and you're listening to the Neighborhood Connect podcast.
This is the Neighborhood Connect podcast, and we are here with Dr. Brenda Taylor and Ashley Cash. I'm Paul Young.
And I'm Joyce Cox.
So we're excited to continue this conversation around Memphis 3.0 and what it means for our neighborhoods. We ended off the last conversation talking about what success looks like for Glenview. And I want to throw you a question now, Ashley. What does implementation look like? I've been working in this realm for a little while now, and I understand how community planning goes, and it's very visionary and ambitious. How do we go about achieving some of the things that are laid out?
Yeah, great question, Paul. And that's what, when you get done talking to people about how excited they are to be engaged in the process, they say, okay, now what? What's the realistic parts about this process? And so when we talk about implementation and implementing these strategies and priorities, first of all, as we craft them together with the citizens of Memphis, we are looking at realistic priorities. Now, realistic can still be 10 or 20 years, but something that we know is sort of a reachable goal and a reachable recommendation. To that end, we are also working with people around town who have expertise in certain areas to help us craft out what realism looks like, what hurdles we might face if we're about to try to take on something and what we might want to look at as far as policy. But for implementation for the office, the plan is a 2-year process. And the Office of Comprehensive Planning is a new office, but the office is not designed to dissolve at the end of the comprehensive planning process. We are then going to transition from planning to implementation, and that will make my office responsible for finding those implementation dollars, finding areas of alignment within the CIP budget, and finding different partners in our philanthropic community, but also our private market that can fill in some of those gaps as it relates to implementation.
So how do the artists play a part in the process?
Yeah, thank you so much for bringing that up. So we are trying to think innovatively as it relates to engagement and planning in Memphis, period. We haven't done this in almost 40 years, so we've got to get it right this time. We will be doing an artist call probably in February. We're working with Urban Art Commission, and we'll be hiring 3 artists to partner with our planners, and they will go out, they will engage the communities along with our planners and try to help people think creatively through some solutions, maybe through some idea generation. It could be, we always think of public art when we think artists, but it doesn't necessarily have to be public art. It could be something maybe a little bit more intangible, but we're really looking for artists to bring something new to this process and to bring out people who normally wouldn't be engaged in this type of planning process.
So what types of topics are being addressed as part of this comprehensive plan? Because comprehensive implies everything.
Everything, anything and everything. So we are looking at this plan through 4 major pillars. Connectivity, so that'll be how you get around town, how you get from your house to your school to your job, etc. We're looking at the livability of a neighborhood. So what makes you feel like, what makes your neighborhood feel like home? How are your open spaces being kept up? What's the urban design of your area? We're looking at sustainability of a city, conserving natural resources, being a resilient city, and being adaptive to any disasters that may arise. And then we're also looking at opportunity. So that is where you come, where you have your affordable housing, market rate housing, any type of housing that fits with your budget. You should be able to find it within the city of Memphis. Job opportunities, economic development opportunities at the neighborhood level, and just economic development and growth for our city as a whole.
Great. So Dr. Taylor, I'm going to bring you back in, and I'm about to put you on the spot. So you are the only person in this conversation right now that's a non-government employee.
Right.
So you're representing the neighborhoods at this point, and I wanted to hear from you any insights, advice you can give us as we embark on this process as a city, because it's not just the Office of Comprehensive Planning. Mayor Strickland has made this one of his top priorities, and so every department of city government is involved with this process. If you could give us any insights, advice on how we can best embark on this journey and how we best engage with the neighborhoods and the community, what would you say to us?
I would say that I really liked what Ashley said about coming back and revisiting Glenview. Glenview is like a sleeping giant. It's been there in the city for a very, very long time. And you say to people, well, I live in Glenview, and they'll say, well, where in the world is that? So I want Glenview, areas like Glenview, to be recognized. I think getting feedback from the residents, continuous feedback would be good. And then getting the residents in each of the communities involved in creating their plan, their individual plans, because they know what the needs of their communities are. So getting continuous feedback regarding that, and not leaving out any community, but every community is important, and every community needs to be heard.
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah, one of the questions I always have when we embark on these processes is how do we ensure that this plan doesn't result in a list of recommendations for government to do, because we all know that if we rely on government to be the end-all be-all for redevelopment of our communities, that it won't happen. And so what my hope is that as we embark on this journey, that we figure out ways to empower the residents to take ownership of some of the challenges that need to be addressed. Obviously, government has a significant role to play, and we we can and we will and we should follow what the citizens call for. But in the end, that won't be enough. We have to have those change agents like yourself on the ground that are helping to make our communities better.
I think it's going to be important to identify leaders in the communities. You want people who can be the drum majors for this effort. So you want to bring those individuals in and have them sitting around the table at the very beginning, very, very early. You want them involved, and they can help by your empowering them. Help to promote your efforts and get the other individuals in the community involved. I think motivation is going to be the key. You want people in the community to be excited about the project. So whatever leaders you select, those leaders will have to be excited about the project, you know. So getting them involved at the very beginning and having them to share information with the residents. Right now in Glenview, we're so excited, we don't know what to do. So we've got, like I said, the Neighborhood Association involved, we got the CDC involved, and we've got members of the Neighborhood Association coming in, and our numbers are just growing and growing. In fact, the other day we had an activity, and I would say we had over 150 people. Wow. And I was just telling someone, I said, you know, while we have them in a group, we need to really do something special. So I think the next time we'll have some breakout sessions when we have that event and then share information about the community. So, just getting them involved.
Because, you know, we have over 450 registered neighborhood leaders in the city of Memphis. So getting them involved would be awesome. You would meet gather a larger group of people. And you're listening to the Neighborhood Connect podcast, and we're here with Dr. Brenda Taylor and Miss Ashley Cash.
Yeah, so I want to build on that last point that you made, because one of my hopes from this process is that we have a new generation of leaders that bubble up. We know who some of the leaders are in the community, but there are many leaders that are unknown to the broader community. And my hope is that some of those leaders bubble to the top and they begin to take on leadership and roles in this community and continue to advance where we want to go. One of my challenges in housing and community development is it's rare that you'll ever see the city just take on a project where we go in and we build a grocery store in a community. But what we will do is we will partner with a community development corporation or a neighborhood group that is ready to embark on those types of things. And so we want to make sure that through this process, those organizations are supported and strengthened so that we can have new vessels to invest with.
Exactly. You know, I talk to a lot of neighborhood associations and neighborhood leaders, and they're older, and they're trying to figure out how do we pass the baton on to the youth? How do we engage them? And we in our last segment we talked to Blue City Culture Center, where they did the tour, and they the youth and the elderly worked together on that. And I was glad to see some youth at some of the 3.0 meetings. So
we are absolutely that is great advice, and I'm glad that everybody is raising that. We are planning to tap into neighborhood leaders and hopefully build up the capacity of some of those grassroots organizations and some of those smaller organizations, so that we're not at the end of the day the only ones responsible for implementing, that we have an army of invested people that are interested in implementing for the betterment of their community.
Well, this is great. This has been a productive discussion. You will continue to see and hear more about Memphis 3.0 over the next 2 years. Hopefully everyone listening will get an opportunity to engage, to go out and be a part of this. We really feel like this is going to be transformative. Didn't get into the reason for 3.0, but the rationale for the name is that we're getting ready to go into our third century of existence for the city of Memphis. And so this is what 3.0 stands for, and we're going to chart the path for the next 100 years, not just the next 2 or 3 years or 5 years. We're really thinking about what our next destiny is going to be as a community. So we thank you all for being here today.
Thank you so much.
Thank you all for listening. This is the Neighborhood Connect podcast, and my name is Paul Young.
And I'm Joyce Cox.
Thank you. This is Neighborhood Connect, executive produced by the Division of Housing and Community Development, hosted by Paul Young and Joyce Cox for HCD, engineered, recorded, and produced by Kudzukian.